we today to now have with us Vitaly Sharovatov, a great tech enthusiast with more than 2 decades of experience in technology. And he will guide us through some of the confusing parts of testing. How much testing is justified? Should we shift left or should we shift right? Sometimes we don't know. And another thing I read in your bio there is you saved over 40 dogs, over 50 dogs and cats. So that is very, very exciting. And I hope
Thank
we
you.
see something about it in your talk. Otherwise, I'll ask a question about it. Okay, let's get started.
Thank you so much, sir. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. And yes, this is my talk, Value, Money, and Costs, the ultimate common language for the testing strategy. This is me. This is how my wife draws me with a dog. I've been 23, almost 24 years in IT. I've been a developer. I started doing JavaScript development back in 2001 when Internet Explorer 5.5 was still a thing, and I still have some trauma from that. I was also a QA engineer and engineering manager, a mentor. I've been mentoring junior developers and junior managers for like 15 years now. And now I'm developer advocate at Case. I'm also a quality enthusiast. I believe that our world deserves products of higher quality, and that is why we're all testers can help with that. There is my LinkedIn, and yeah, these are the last 6 puppies I saved in Georgia. They were so tiny. Now look at them. Now they're 2 years old and beautiful and happy. Yes, now to the talk. Ward Cunningham, ages ago, coined the term technical debt. You've all heard of it. But now he's saying that the metaphor has lost the meaning on pretty much everyone. When he was coining this term, he was doing this with his manager, who was an MBA. And both Ward and the manager knew the economical meaning of the term debt, that we have to essentially repay it. Then there is Ron Jeffries, who invented the term story points, and now he is apologizing for that. He is saying the term meaning got lost completely. And this loss of meaning in our industry unfortunately happens way too often. For instance, MVP was never about bad quality or like shipping some bad stuff to production and seeing how it works. It was always about cutting the functionality. So ship as little as possible to satisfy clients' desires and needs. Now we pretty much all hear from managers, oh, let's make it an MVP. Let's just publish it and see how it works. Let's cut on testing. Let's cut on quality assurance. Same happened with DevOps. It was never about hiring engineers to do DevOps. It was always about the culture of owning the code and maintenance of the code as well. And this is the funny thread on Stack Overflow about the difference between a mock and a stub. Still, there are people who lost the understanding for these terms. And I would argue that the lack of shared grammar and vocabulary always distorts communication. If we mean something different by the same word, it's very hard to agree on what we're doing. And this always, pretty much always, results in suboptimal decisions. And this is the famous Tower of Babel, the biblical myth of the situation where people lost understanding, mutual understanding, because the languages were separated. Some of the developers are saying, why aren't you using my bricks? And some other developers are replying in French that I need to do code review first. And like at work, we always pretty much always speak English. Well, at least I can say for myself and for the people I talk to, we use English. And yet it seems that we're speaking different languages. Like engineers can say, we need more tests. And managers will answer, but customers didn't pay for that. And finally, both are kind of right and both might be wrong at the same time. Or engineers can say, we need more code reviews. And other engineers will say, but they slow us down. And both are right again. Maybe we need code review and maybe they will slow us down as well. Or managers can say, let's release now, quite a popular thing, right? And engineers will say, no, the code is bad. This all means that we lack some common vocabulary and grammar to, even when we speak the same language, we still often cannot agree. And the result of this is far from mythical. This is all very real. In 2012, Knight Capital lost $400 million due to a simple uncaught regression bug. They had this bug. Their system of regression testing showed this bug, but they didn't react. In 2024, you've all heard about CrowdStrike incident, and it's estimated to result in a loss of 10 billions. And that was simply because their configuration system wasn't tested well enough. And I don't know about the particular details of their company, but I believe testers and engineers told the managers that they needed to test it. It's the managerial decision, suboptimal decision, not to test this particular part of the system. And also in 2024, 60 billion was the estimated loss due to Boeing doing insufficient MCAS testing, the testing of one of the parts of the flight control system. But what's really sad about it is that engineers did speak up. They did say that we needed to test this MCAS system better. But again, suboptimal decision was made. So it seems that everyone tests. Every single company does some testing. But I think that in order for us to make more optimal decisions together, we need to understand each other better. And I would suggest to use economics as the base grammar for that, because we're all, both managers and testers and developers, we're all interested in doing the right things. And engineers in particular have these strong professional ethics which guide us to do things the right way, not only the right things, but also to do them the right way. And we as testers care about our users. We care about our professional ethics. Engineers do the same. And yet, I would say that it is very hard to reason about ethics with managers. At least in my experience, it's very hard. Maybe just a couple of times I managed to persuade managers to invest some resources into additional testing, required testing, because I said this is ethically correct. So more often we can agree with managers if we bring up the money. And in my experience, framing the whole testing as an investment works well. And here's why. Testing, as we all know, consumes resources. So when I'm doing testing, I'm spending my time. My time is paid by my company. So I'm spending money. I'm also delaying something if I'm doing testing after the development is done. Testing itself doesn't generate revenue. So when I'm doing some testing, I do not add any functionality which clients would use. I only reduce some risks. And testing outcome is the lack of issues. So when I've done my testing right, clients will not have problems. And it's very, very hard to reason about the lack of something. Is it my work, what's been done right, which resulted in the lack of issues? Or is it pure luck? How can we reason about it? And what's even harder is to justify investing more resources into something which the outcome of which is lack of issues. And what's adding more to this is that testing never gives 100% guarantee. So I could frame my whole testing strategy as an economical strategy. I could persuade managers to invest more money into required testing. I could do all the testing right, and yet an incident might happen. And this all is quite hard. This is our fate. We have to speak about, we have to reason about things like this. But when, in my experience, when I am speaking to managers and framing testing as an investment, it makes everything much easier. There is a good definition, classical definition of an investment. It is an asset obtained at a cost, purchased or obtained at a cost, on the expectation that it will deliver future value. And what's important, greater than its current initial cost. If you do shares trading, you know that there is no guarantee that the shares will go up, that the price will rise. And yet you follow your intuition or your professional knowledge on the industry to buy some shares to invest in them. And then you might get a good outcome of it. If they rise in price, if their price rises, you get more money. So testing can be framed as an investment made today to reduce the probability of some bad stuff, of some costly failures tomorrow. And what's again very important here, that the risks of not doing that are higher than the cost of testing. So when I start speaking to managers, talking to managers in this frame, they become quite curious because they realize that this language is something similar to what they learned at their MBA courses or their university. And then I can invite them to start discussing the whole approach to testing using this very simple framework. We need to understand our risks. We need to prioritize them in terms of their value. I mean, in terms of how much bad stuff will happen if a certain risk occurs. And then we, with testers and engineers, can decide and can justify investing into certain testing activities to reduce those risks. So how this works in practice? I do 1, 2, 3 days workshop with managers. I invite marketers, sales, CTO, everyone who, product managers of course, everyone who is involved in budgeting, everyone who has the money. Every single manager has some fears. And I can ask them to brainstorm the fears, to then work with them. So what I do, I look into ISO 25010 standard. This is a good standard with all the quality characteristics for all the products. What they did when they were creating this standard, they analyzed thousands, if not tens of thousands of different products to see how they can categorize quality attributes or quality characteristics into some meaningful model. And they came up with this very simple model. You can read, I'll give you the links, you can read about it. So what I do, I ask the managers to brainstorm the risks. Let's say a product manager has the fear that the clients will suddenly have no way to pay on the website for our services. And I ask the product manager, what do you estimate this risk to result financially? And they can say 1 million loss a day. They can talk to sales, they can look it up themselves, they can use the statistics to come up with the financial quantification of this risk. And then I map this risk to interoperability. How I do that? Well, in my experience, most companies don't have their own payment systems. They utilize some external systems like Stripe or any other. And it means that our system, our product, interacts with some external system. This quality characteristic is called in ISO 25010 standard terms interoperability, how two systems interact with each other. Then I talk to marketers, or then I talk to legal folks. What happens if user data leaks? They can say, oh, we will be fined, let's say $4 million. There will be a lawsuit. And this maps directly to confidentiality quality characteristic. Then I talk to marketers and ask them for their fears. And they can say, if the app becomes too slow on a mobile device, churn increases, so people will stop using our app. I've seen so many engineers trying to advocate for performance testing without inviting marketers, and it almost always failed in my experience, because CTO or CEO opened the app on his latest iPhone 17 Pro and it worked really well. And they were like, okay, fine, it's all good, all fine. But if you open this up on Android, some Android device, and you see that with the new release, it got 50% slower because developers introduced some new technology which wasn't properly tested with the performance testing approach, then CTO will not notice it, and it will be very hard to convince him to invest money into this testing. But if you invite marketing managers to say that 10% churn increase will cost us this, and that, they are much more committed now to listen to you when you decide to justify additional testing on for this quality characteristic, which is called time behavior. Or we can talk to legal folks as well. If we're building, let's say, a medical device or a bed or anything physical, what will their fear be? They can say the device might kill the operator when the power goes out. This is brainstorm. This is my idea. But you can talk to them and you ask them what happens if we damage something seriously. Sometimes it might mean even the whole company loses the license to produce this medical device. And this maps to safety. So then it's very, very easy. As soon as you get managers invested morally and mentally into this exercise, it's really easy to prioritize those risks based on the money, on the monetary loss. So this is very, very little table. Usually it's like this huge, and the battle of prioritization always happens. Like managers will have to calibrate on these priorities, of course. But here we can say that safety is of the topmost priority, because if we lose the license, we lose our whole 100 million business. This is priority 10. Interoperability, if clients can't pay and we start losing 1 million a day, products will most likely say this is the next priority. And confidentiality is the last priority. Again, this is just an example. You will have to do this with managers for your own context. But what you get from this, you get a mapping from fears to quality characteristics with money and to prioritization between those quality characteristics. And now you get managers even more curious. Now they're like, aha, I can see how here we map those technical terms like interoperability. What does it even mean? But here they see, aha, this means money. And this means money. And what's really important is that they brought this money. It's not you, an engineer, who estimated using ChatGPT or anything else, or doing your own financial analysis. It's them who brought those risks up. This is very important. And now, time comes to discuss how we can assess the risks. There is a good family of standards, again, called ISO 29119, which talks about testing methods, about various things I'll show you. But we have to choose for those quality characteristics which are of highest priority for us based on the score which managers agreed on. We can talk to our teams and ask, how do you think we can mitigate those risks? Because we have some good commitment from managers, at least on the priority. Now we think how we can do it. We can then we can brainstorm testing approaches and methods and levels and types to those risks and choose the optimal. How it's done? Oh, basically, yeah, this is good. This is my draft of an article for explaining the testing taxonomy from these 4 families of standards. Take a peek. It's on my Beyond Quality community. It's work in progress. It will always be improving. It's ever-living document. Yes, so now what you have is you have risks in quality characteristic terms and the priority. And you come up, and again, this is an example, you come up with testing approaches which you think will mitigate those risks. Let's say for safety, we mentioned that if the device kills an operator, this will mean that we will lose the license, and this is top priority for us. We can't allow that. We brainstormed with testers and engineers that fault injection testing, or chaos testing, how we call it now sometimes, and safety requirements-based testing are the 2 main approaches we want to use to mitigate this risk. For interoperability, when clients can't pay, we say that we need system integration testing, so we need to test how our system integrates with Stripe or whatever. And we also need fault injection testing. We also need to sometimes pull the wire out and see what happens if the payment system dies. Do we show 500 internal error, or what do we do? And for confidentiality, there is a good, again, family of standards, good set of approaches for doing security testing, also including pen tests and all this stuff. So we came up with methods which could assess and mitigate the risks which managers see the highest priority. And now we need to define how to invest. And this is very simple. The higher the score of the priority, the higher the priority, the more important our testing is. So we know that we should invest more money into that. And if we have some testing method, as you saw here, fault injection testing maps to both safety and interoperability. And I've seen companies actually utilizing chaos testing to do a lot of different testing, like to see how their system behaves well. Even they invest sometimes in chaos testing more than in API testing. So if certain testing approaches is mapped to more risks, then it makes perfect sense to invest more in this approach, because you will cover more risks. And if some testing approach is cheaper than others, well, it's obvious. So here we can say that we focus most, in this imaginary example, we focus most on fault injection testing, on chaos testing. Then we focus a lot on safety requirements based testing, because we have to conform to certain safety requirements. Then we invest a lot again in system integration testing, because we don't want to lose the ability for the clients to pay. And then we do security testing. This can be now approved with managers. One thing is left, costs. So we spoke about the value. Here we only speak how much value we need to get from testing, how much risk we are reducing. This is extremely important. And then we need to think, so we start investing. We don't know the costs yet. It's like with the shares as well. You know how much they cost now, but you have to decide how much to invest in a particular share right now. Maybe its price will grow. Maybe you should have invested more yesterday in that share. So costs upfront are very hard to estimate. You all know that estimating a task or estimating any work is extremely hard. So in my experience, the better way would be to start investing into these approaches and do efforts tracking. I hate the term time tracking, because time is like, it always becomes a target. So as soon as you start tracking time, managers will tell you, well, let's spend more time, be more efficient. No, what I'm doing at my work, I'm tracking percentage of effort. So for this particular testing approach, I'm spending 30% of my effort. And in this effort tracking, I can put anything. I mean, in terms of, I know that some types of works are more complicated for me, so I'm spending more effort, even if the time is smaller. So we need to come up with some reassessment procedure. So we start investing, but what happens next? We agree, let's say, to reassess our investment in a month. That's a period of time. Or we agree to reassess our investment strategy if there is a certain signal from the market. Let's say our competitors invaded our market. Do we still need the same type of testing? Or maybe we should change something? Or maybe there is a new governmental regulation of some sort, and we need to start planning how we test against this regulation, like with AI and Safety Act. Or maybe an incident happens. As I've said, testing doesn't guarantee the complete lack of incidents. Sometimes incidents happen. So we need to agree that we start investing, say, in fault injection testing, in chaos testing. But when the incident happens and we see that everything breaks or something breaks, we need to review if our testing strategy is good enough. Because it might be good enough, and this incident is something outside of the scope of what we even want to control. Like for some companies, the recent AWS outage cost pretty much nothing. So have you heard of AWS outage recently? Yeah, you all heard. So it was just for one region, right? Doing multi-regions costs much more than doing just one region. So maybe if you are working within just one region, or maybe your market situation tells you that only working with one region is enough, maybe you can sustain this incident, and maybe it's okay, you don't need to revise. But this signal is a good signal to start doing retrospective analysis of your testing strategy. And so during this retrospective, during this review, what you want to do, you want to ask the certain questions. How well are we mitigating the risks? This is one of the hardest questions in my experience, simply because doing testing is not isolating quality characteristics. It doesn't isolate quality characteristics. When you do chaos testing, you influence very many quality characteristics. When you do security testing, you might also find issues within your APIs, just bugs. So it is very hard to do root cause analysis, which testing approach influence certain risks the most, but you still can do something. For instance, with security testing, there is a good approach, an approach of external audits. Say you started investing more in security audit, in security testing. You can decide that in half a year, you invite external security audit. And they can say, right, now you have improved significantly. So you're getting much more value in terms of reducing security risks. So your expense, you're spending money makes perfect sense. But again, this is hard. This is always going to be hard. How much did the whole testing cost? This is, I would say, a fragile question, a strange question, because managers, particularly without a good education, managerial education, they try to measure everything in just money. Like how many man hours you spend on doing certain testing. Here you have to be very, very careful. As I've said, what I do is I say, this costed me 30% of my effort. And by my, I mean me and my team, our effort. So then we can reprioritize between testing approaches if needed. If we're seeing that we're spending too much effort on doing something which reduces only tiny risk, maybe we should reprioritize. And the next question, which follows the question about costs, is if we can do the whole thing more efficiently. If we can reduce, for instance, cost of delay by moving shift left. You've heard of shift left, right? Yay, cool. This is very simple to do with this approach. If you speak to any product manager, what they value the most, they will tell you that they value time to market the most. They want features, new functionality to be available to the clients ASAP. As soon as they did their market analysis with marketers, as soon as they did their business modeling, as soon as they did their UX modeling and everything, they come to developers, or developers sit with them, doesn't matter, but they want developers to produce features to clients, to deliver feature to clients. And in classical life cycle of software development, you have something like on the top picture, have development, then some wait time, then code review. So like if I finish the feature and I pass it to you, Miko, you will not jump on it straight away, right? I mean, you're doing some other work. So the feature will wait for a bit. Then you'll do the review. Then you'll pass it to me back. In the best case scenarios, there will be no fixes. But usually there are some fixes. So you pass it to me back, but I'm working on something else now. I'm doing some other feature. So I'll do some fixes after some little wait time. Then I pass it back for code review. This is a bad scenario. Sometimes you can deliver on this calendar, sometimes you can deliver on Monday. But again, testing here doesn't find any issues. If testing here doesn't find any issues. If they do, the time to market will be even bigger. But in a few teams where I managed to persuade managers to do some shifting left, some proper shifting left with ensemble programming and ensemble work, the whole life cycle looks like this. You can deliver something much, much faster. Simply because everyone is sitting by one computer and testing can start right from the very first look at the task. Like when we're just starting to look at the task, testers can say, we want to test for that. Let's start writing tests for that. Maybe you can employ TDD, maybe BDD, whatever. Even if you don't do that, even if you just sit by one computer doing everything needed on one task, your time to market will be much lower. And here, this is decreasing time to market and increasing quality, simply because there are very many studies that, and it's common sense after all, that if 3 of us or 4 of us are sitting by one computer, we will spot more bugs. This is constant code review, constant testing. This works much better. And also, if you have testers participating in that, and I highly encourage to try it out, we can then write automatic tests, all types of them, much faster, and developers will know how to write them, and testers will know how to write them. So we do knowledge sharing all the time. So very many benefits, but the cost in terms of salary increases, of course. And then here we can speak with product managers, talk to them and say, this is the quality increase, this is time to market decrease, and this is salary increase. What do you prefer? Do you prefer features to be faster with higher quality on production available to users? Or do you want to spend less on building them? And here, this actually shows a very interesting concept called cost of delay. Your product, if you bring this concept to a product manager, you will have a fruitful conversation with them. When product manager comes to you and says, we want this feature in production, we want this feature for the client, a good product manager will have some financial modeling, some modeling like what this feature will do, how it will benefit our client, how it will improve their lives. And from that, you can say, so dear product manager, what happens if we deploy this feature on 1st of December or on 1st of November? What do you prefer? Do you prefer to deploy it on 1st of November? Then we'll be spending more money on the salary. Yeah, so this is just one of the approaches of reducing how reducing handovers and shifting all the work left can improve your quality and can be well justified to the product managers if they actually listen. So I would say that for us to have good discussions with product managers where we do understand them and they do understand us, we can use this very, very simple grammar of economics that we can use ISO testing taxonomy as the vocabulary and our experience as well, and come up with this common language. And let me summarize it all. So testing is an investment in reducing risks. And this means that the risks of not doing testing should be higher than the investment cost. You won't be testing one feature for a year, even if you wanted to do that, right? I mean, it's common sense. We need to constrain our testing to bring the most of the value. And what's really, really important here to consider and to discuss with managers is that the risks come first, the value comes first, and only then we can speak about the costs. So if the managers are afraid of certain risks, this is the highest value. Then we can start investing into reducing those risks, and then we can consider the costs. And yes, proactive is always cheaper than reactive. For instance, there are interesting studies showing that continuous safety training at work yields better results when the accident happens than carefully designing incident response plan. Because when people feel where to go with their legs, when they actually try it out, when they do the dry runs, the experiments with running away from the building in case of fire, they will more likely do the same when fire happens, if fire happens. This is proactive measure. Reactive is just to build a list of what to do when things happen and expect people to react to this incident. Prove the value. This is the hardest thing in my experience. We can speak about the risks, we can map them to quality characteristics, prioritize them, invest in certain testing approaches. Proving the value is the hardest one because unfortunately not all managers want to listen. So yes, this framework of thought can help you find some common understanding with those managers who want to listen. In my experience, I have met a few managers who didn't want to listen. Their final argument was, and what? And you cannot do anything with this argument. But I follow this ethical rule, change your company or change your company. And it works well for me. So that is it for the talk. This is my LinkedIn and this is the Beyond Quality community.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
This
sir.
was very insightful. Some talk finally about the costs and the price and the value of everything that we produce. That's something that we should be more proactive, spreading out to the managers so they know what we are worth. Now, the first question is, do you have any advice on KPIs or metrics to measure the effectiveness or profitability of testing?
Thank you for the question. I have very strong opinions on this matter. I follow Dr. Deming, in his hatred towards KPIs. There are very many studies that KPIs destroy teams because they are individual. KPIs bring up the law of unintended consequences. There is a good story in India when India was under British rule. British people didn't like that there were very many snakes in the streets, and they decided to introduce a financial reward for people to bring them snakes' heads. So, like, to kill the snake and bring the snake to the government. Indians were smart. They started breeding snakes. So they started breeding snakes and bringing more and more heads in return for the money. British administration found out about that, weren't happy. They stopped paying, and Indians released all the snakes in the street. And the history of human civilization is full of examples of this law of unintended consequences, where you start changing the system suboptimally, changing just one bit of the system. If you want to motivate people to do something, there are very many better ways, and we can discuss it separately. Metrics, I treat them always as signals. I have yet to find a good metric which is good on its own. For instance, in one company for which I worked for, after careful consideration with the team, I cut coverage from 70% to 30% by removing a lot of tests. And this resulted in higher quality for the system. The reason was simple. The tests were brittle and flaky. And we were spending way too many time on maintenance of those tests. And can you imagine removing automated tests and starting doing some exploratory and manual work was faster than maintaining those flaky tests? And according to the metrics of this company, everything was great. The coverage was rising, right? And yet the quality of the system degraded. So I have zero examples on a single metric which can be used to track effectiveness of testing. We can always come up with certain signals for our particular context. Let's say if we are investing now in testing automation, in certain type of testing automation, we can agree within the team that we are looking on a dashboard that tests are green and we have more and more tests every day. But again, if you work within a team, why don't you just ask people? Like, why don't you just see what they're doing? So let's have this discussion separate. It's a huge one. Oh, thank you so much. Oh. Thank you. I'm blushing.
Is that a question or is it just a comment?
That's the statement, I guess. What is the best way for a QA to approach management and demonstrate the long-term business value of investing in testing rather than cutting back on QA roles? So this is complex. Cutting back on QA roles usually comes from some way up managerial decisions. Unfortunately, sometimes investors or there are decisions made way above us to cut people, to lay off people. I've yet to find a way to fight this. I once quit one company where I had to fire people from my team. I just said, no, go. I go. I won't stay in this. I won't make this decision. But I'm quite privileged in a way because I could find a new job pretty soon. In this day and age, in this market, it's very hard to find a job. So this is ethical. This is very hard to reason about what to do when management decides to cut people. If we speak about the business value, what I suggested in the topic is to start the discussion. Maybe you can't invite chief marketing officer and chief product officer and chief CTO, chief technical officer to this workshop. But maybe you can get their feedback directly. Maybe you can go to marketing and say, what do you think happens if this and that? Or go to sales and say, what do you think happens if this and this occurs? You can get some feedback. In the ideal way, you run the workshop with C-level folks. Maybe you can do it with just managers. So you first prove with monetary value, with like you invest in additional, you do the workshop, you invest in additional testing. Then what you do is show the value. Here's what we've done. We changed our testing strategy. We invested more in this and this. We cut investment in this, and we improved the situation. We reduced the risks. Maybe you can ask the company to invite some external audit to prove what you're doing. This is very hard. This is not for everyone. I tried doing that and sometimes I failed. But if you do that, that's a good first step into managerial world if you want that. Maybe you don't.
The next question is actually very interesting. I like it very much because what if we fail? I mean, I fail all the time, but how can we regain trust? And if we don't deliver the return on investment, what can we do?
But that's the same question like what if I break the production code, right? It's pretty much the same. What happens? Well, it depends on your culture, on the culture of your company. I did my best to grow culture of accepting failures and grow culture of experimentation in companies. I try to frame everything we introduce new as an experiment. So we experiment on that, we see how it works, and then we learn from that experiment. Like one of the friends of mine in JetBrains, he works for Kotlin team, and they tried introducing automated testing, and they failed. Well, they were lucky that in that company, in that culture, they weren't prosecuted or punished for that. In many companies, good initiatives, when they result in a failed experiment, they are punished for. So you have to carefully consider your culture. Look at what other people are doing. If experimentation is okay in your company, it's safer. But maybe you will be the first to do that. Not sure. There is no good answer to that.
So the next question is about over-testing. When will we test too much? Before you answer, there's one request for showing you the QR link to your article. And I think a lot of people will want to read the article, but we need the help of the presenter. So while you're doing this, maybe the presenter can show the article again. And you answer to us, how can we check if we are over-testing?
This is very, very interesting. In normal investments, like investing a bit more. Like if you're looking at Nvidia stocks, if you're into shares in stocks, you would rather spend a bit more on that than you think is needed. In testing, it's pretty much the same. We are reducing risks, so we want to have just a bit more testing than exactly needed, because also in many companies politics kick in and they say, well, you estimated this for like you measured that you spend so much effort. Let's cut down just a bit. You can work more. You can work not 60 hours a week, but 70 hours a week. It will be fine for you. So it's better to do some more than needed. But I said that you have to have a review of some cadence. Like half a year passed, do an honest review for yourself. Maybe you're spending way too much effort in terms of percentage on something which isn't reducing certain risks significantly. Maybe you can change it. But there is no rule of thumb. The only way to do it is to review what you've been doing.
I think we have time for one more question. The next question is, what would be your plan for moving the team to shift left?
Right. Thank you so much. So this is good. I tried two ways. First one was partisanship. So I just agreed with my team that we're not reporting this to anyone. I was an engineering manager there. I agreed with my team, we're not reporting our changes to anyone. We are keeping quiet. But we all folks are sitting now with one computer. we started doing mobbing. Then it was called mobbing. Now it's called ensemble programming. And the team was happy, and the results were good. We started delivering much faster, and the managers accepted our partisanship approach. They were like, Vitaly, don't do that anymore, right? But this is good. This worked. In one of the banks I worked for, it was all, I would say, quite anal. People were demanding so many reports on everything, as it often happens in financial institutions. But I managed to show them the same picture I was showing before, cutting time to market. I managed to find a manager, this was really good of me, I managed to find a manager who was under certain scrutiny for his team being slow. And I told him, let's experiment. It's not going to be worse for you, right? I mean, you're on PEEP now already. Let's try it out. And we tried it out and it worked. So I and this manager, we then showed reports to the upper management saying, see, yes, we are spending more salary on one feature, but we're delivering so quickly. So like in 1 month's time, we managed to deliver many features, much more features than we usually were able to.
Okay, that's a great story. That's a great insight, and it's all good role model for us
Thank you,
to
sir.
test more and deliver more features. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.